You'd be hard-pressed today to find an organization that isn't in some way obsessed with measuring employee engagement and trying to create a more engaged employee. But what does that actually mean? Employee engagement for many of us is this attempt to try to measure the connection that employees have to an organization. And so we are stuck trying to figure out how often should we measure this kind of a connection? How often should we measure this satisfaction and engagement that our employees actually have? Do we measure it once a year like so many organizations around the world? Do we measure it every 6 months? Every 3 months? Maybe every 2 years. How often is the optimal number? Let's say I told you the optimal number to measure employee engagement was every 6 months. Then what? Does that mean that just because you measure employee engagement every 6 months that somehow justifies and creates an engaged workforce? I think that we need to take a step back inside of our organizations and understand that it's not just how often we measure employee engagement, but what we do with the information that we collect. Let's say that when you went home today and you looked at your significant other, your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, and you had this conversation with them and said, how often should I ask you for feedback? How often should I ask you how you're doing or try to understand if you're upset or if something that I'm doing is causing you some sort of discomfort? Do I need to check in with you every 6 months? Do I need to check in with you every 3 months, every day, every hour? What is the optimal number for you to check in with your spouse, and what is the optimal number to check in with your people? I don't think there is an optimal number. I think that we do this all the time in our personal lives, right? We don't have this mental calculator that tells us, hey, I need to check in with my wife, I need to check in with my husband today. We just kind of know. We know when somebody's having a bad day, we know when somebody's having a good day, and we have these ongoing conversations on a regular basis. And not only that, but we allow our significant others to start these conversations with us instead of us always just assuming that we need to start the conversation with them. So I think organizations need to get away from this idea and this template of having to measure employee engagement every 3 months or every 6 months or every year. Try to collect this data on your employees and try to have these conversations with them as often as you possibly can. And don't just feel like you always have to start the conversation, but see what you can do to actually encourage your employees to come to you to start these conversations, to bring you feedback and ideas and suggestions for how you as an organization can improve. I think the more often we can do this, the better. And again, it's not just what we do, or it's not just the information that we collect, but it's what we do with that information. Going back to the spouse analogy, let's say that your significant other told you what made them upset all the time. Would you still keep doing what it is that made them upset? Hopefully you would change, and hopefully you would say, I'm sorry, I didn't know that this upsets you, I'm gonna do something differently. The same thing happens inside of our organizations. If your employees tell you something makes them unhappy, if your employees tell you what will make them happy, the idea and the hope is that your organization will invest in those things to help make your employees either happier or to help mitigate or to help alleviate whatever is causing them discomfort. So I think those are the two things that we need to think about when it comes to employee engagement or employee experience or whatever it is that you want to measure. Don't worry about how often you do it. Just do it on a regular, ongoing basis. The more often you can do it, the better. Get away from the templates. And remember that it's not just how often you measure that counts, it's what you do with the information that you collect. I think that is the best way to create an organization where people actually want, not need, to show up to work.